Hello, it's Bagoon here with another episode of Learn to Trigger Intermediate. I'm speaking to you from the text editor rather from Age of Mythology today. That's because I'm going to start by telling you about the data types Age of Mythology uses. This might seem a bit disjointed from our last video, but it will come in handy later, especially in the next video when I talk about making your own triggers. So, here I've listed the 5 types of data that Age of Mythology has that we need to be concerned about now. We've talked about some of these before. So first of all, we've got an integer, and that is a whole number, but not anything with decimal points. So anything like that, but no decimal points. If you have decimal points, that is a float, and you may remember that quest-vars are stored as floats. This can be a whole number with any array of decimal points after it as well. We also have a bool, which is either true or false, so it's essentially a switch or a condition. We have a string, which is a line of text, and then we have a vector, which is a coordinate in 3D space. So you might remember we've actually been using some of these in the basic series. So if you're sending a chat, what you're actually sending is a string. And that's all very well and well. You can get it to say whatever you like, much as what we did in the last video, but sometimes you remember we're adding extra data types in there, such as quest-vars. So, how do we convert a float to an integer to remove those trailing decimals from the quest-var? You may remember we multiply it by 1. So if we have a float of 4.5 and we multiply it by 1, it returns an integer 4. AOM will always round the float down when you multiply it by 1, so even 4.999 will be converted to an integer of 4. Then we add the integer into the string, and you might remember some code that looks fairly similar to that. So what we've got here is we've got our quest-var as a float, we've multiplied it by 1 to convert it to an integer, and removed the trailing decimals, but then we have the quotation marks and the plus there. So what's that one about? If you think about it as looking at our string here, and then if I place it here beside the string so we can see what's happening, the string, it doesn't contain quotation marks because we just type raw text in there, so that's already generated at the start and at the end of our string. I'm going to put that one at the end of the string and delete that one. So we've got the one at the start that AOM puts in for us with the trigger, and the one at the end that AOM puts in for us with the trigger, and then we've got the rest of the code there. If we were to paste this code into a chat message, we'd get Dave is dead, followed by the integer value of quest-var1. What's actually happening here, if I put some more spaces in between, we're doing something called concatenation, which means combining a string. So sometimes we do this if we have Dave for our name, and then is dead for the effect. So we've got one string, Dave, then we're adding another string, Dave is dead, and that would come out exactly like that, because there aren't any spaces there, so you just put a space there or there to get the space there. So that's 2 strings combined into one string. Essentially the same thing's happening here. We are finishing our string with quotation marks. We are telling Age of Mythology we want to add something to it. We're adding an integer, and we're adding the integer of our quest-var. After that, we add another plus sign to tell us that we're still adding something, and then another quotation mark. Now that explains a little bit what we've been doing in the basic series. I want to show you a little bit more how this works to prove what I've been saying to you here, and we'll find out a bit more about how Age of Mythology sort of understands the data that you put in to the triggers, and then we can look at the next video and create our own triggers. Okay, so now we're in Age of Mythology. I've just set up a very basic QuestVar lab so I can show you what's happening here. The setup is this. I've got two QuestVars that I've just randomly set, and now I'm going to send some chats. So you'll be very much used to this one, just the one times QuestVarGet QuestVar1. I can put hi there, and I can put hi at the end, so it goes between our highs. I'm going to do another line of text where I'm removing the one times, so it's just the QuestVar with the trailing decimals. We're also getting hi afterwards. What I'm going to do for the next one is one times our QuestVar, but what I'm going to do here is add 9 to it. So let's test this scenario and see what happens. So you see we've got our strings, but maybe not the ones you were thinking about. If we have a look at these, we can see what we got. So we got hi our var perfect, we got hi our second var perfect, but this one might be a bit of a cause for confusion. QV2 plus 9. So it was 1 times QuestVar2, which rounds down to 4, and plus 9. So we got 49, but we shouldn't have. What we're actually doing there is we're adding a string of 9 on, instead of adding an integer of 9 on. If we wanted to do that the other way, I can show you how we do this. I'm just going to annotate these for later. So we're going to do the string one and the integer one. So Asian Mythology is reading all of this as a string, so we're getting our QuestVar and then we're adding 9 onto it. If we want it to be included in the integer, we need to put brackets round it in much the same way you do in maths, just to make sure that it's all contained. So we're adding, but we're adding an integer, and it's this integer plus 9 into our string. If we test it now, you see it's 13, not 49. If that's frying your brain a little bit, that's still fine. We've got a bit more to do. What I want you to do is look in your trigger2 folder, and you'll find a text file called trigtemp. Open that one up, and it will contain the raw trigger code of the last scenario you played. Load up a scenario, that file will appear. Go and have a look at it now and see what it is. So this trigger2 file, it's going to be in your Steam library, Steam apps, common, Age of Mythology, trigger2. There'll be a file in there called trigtemp.xs. Open it up and you'll get something that looks like this. This is the raw trigger code of the scenario that I showed you. So you can see it's running in order. I made very sure that I set my QuestVars before I set my text, otherwise it would have completely destroyed everything. Now we're getting to the interesting bits. So look at our strings. So we're saying hi, we're having the quotation marks and the addition. I'm just going to add some spaces to expand that. So we close the string, we tell Age of Mythology we want to add more text. It takes the form of an integer of our QuestVar. We're adding to the string again, opening with a quotation mark to tell Age of Mythology we're looking at string data, and then we're just putting our text in. For the next one, it's much the same. We've closed the string, and then we haven't had the one times, so it's telling Age of Mythology we'll want the float of QuestVar2, which is 4.8. Then we are adding a string to it again in much the same way. If you're removing the quotation marks that Age of Mythology puts in, then you get the raw text which I put in to the trigger text box, if that helps things make a little bit more sense there. So that's the actual code I put in, and if we add what Age of Mythology does, which is those two quotation marks there, this is straight from the trigtemp, so this is the raw code, so you don't have to take my word for it, you can see the evidence there. Next we look at our string value, where we had a string text, a dash, and then we told Age of Mythology to close that string. We are adding to the string with an integer of our QuestVar2, 4.8, which gets rounded down to 4, and that's already been done. That's an integer. That has been satisfied. And then we are adding 9. That's another integer. It also could have been a string. If I'd have put some quotation marks around it, wouldn't have made much of a difference. Then we're telling Age of Mythology we add, we're going back in the string, and then we're closing. You'll find out that if you miss these two, Age of Mythology gets a bit confused with the data type, and you get a trigger lock and a trigger error. Underneath, we have our integer value. So this is when it was the QuestVar plus 9, so this was 13, because we round down the float by making it an integer. So here, I'm saying integer, add, and then I've got this whole bracketed expression here, which Age of Mythology is just going to treat as an integer because it stays within the brackets, and Age of Mythology can do maths as well. Underneath we have some different data types. You'll see I've revealed the map by setting fog and black map to false. That's how the trigger code works. And I've set a camera cut by using quite a complicated number of vectors there. That's the output Age of Mythology does when you set a camera cut. It gives you a huge number of vectors to work with, and I don't understand all the components, but I sometimes mess with them and get a desired effect there. You're looking at 3D space and rotation as well, so you get into some very complicated maths there. So I say have a play with your QuestVars, have a look at your trigtemps, especially if you're going to be using our special code here, and that's hopefully going to stand you in good stead for understanding the data types in Age of Mythology. This is going to be useful. Our next video, we're going to be using the knowledge of data types to start writing our own triggers. Exciting stuff. If you're going to download this from Age of Mythology Heaven, I've actually put the scenario that I used in this video in the zip file, just because I know this is quite a lot to take in. It's quite advanced, high-level stuff, but that's what you signed up for when you wanted the intermediate series. Thanks very much, and we'll see you again in the next video.